great honor to be invited back to the Penn Museum to talk about my research. I want to thank the AIA especially and everyone else who made my visit possible today. Amazon seem to be everywhere these days. We're in the midst of an Amazon moment. It started with Xena, Warrior Princess, the animated films Mulan and Brave, about young girl archers, the Hunger Games, Atalanta, in the recent Hercules film. There are the Shield Maidens in the Vikings TV series and the powerful women in the Game of Thrones. I don't know if you are comics fans. Marvel Comics did something very radical. They just introduced Thor as a war goddess, a female Captain Marvel, and the new Ms. Marvel, a Muslim girl named Kamala Khan. And Wonder Woman, who first appeared during World War II, is poised for a comeback. I hear that she will have her own movie in 2017 and already cast the lead role. And of course, girls and women, I'm sure you know some, maybe some of you right here today, are taking up archery in unprecedented numbers. And at the end of my talk, I promise to show some real-life modern Amazons who practice mounted archery. And meanwhile, the news from the Middle East is filled with images of women soldiers of Kurdistan fighting the Islamic State. According to the latest figures, about 10,000 women have been recruited or are joining the Kurdish Peshmerga. They are fighting for their lives, of course. So we're surrounded by images and stories of Amazon-like women. And some 2,500 years ago, the ancient Greeks also surrounded themselves with Amazon images and stories. The Greeks described Amazons as the equals of men, independent, fearless women who hunted and rode to battle. These are a few images from the 6th century BC. They're here in the Penn Museum collections. Here we have Heracles battling Amazons, a pair of Amazons on horseback with their dogs. Another scene from the Penn Museum. Who were the ancient Amazons? In the myths that are famous, Amazons were fierce women of exotic lands, as courageous and skilled in battle as the mightiest Greek heroes. And according to the Greeks, Amazons were located in a vast territory that the Greeks called Scythia, that was their blanket term, around the Black Sea and beyond, all the way to Mongolia. Amazons played a major role in the legendary Trojan War, and in the chronicles of the city of Athens, Athenians like to say that they bravely fought a powerful Amazon army that had invaded Greece. And in the Greek myths, as many of you know, every great champion, Heracles or Hercules, Theseus, Achilles, they all had to prove their courage by overcoming a formidable warrior queen. And we have their names too, Hippolyta, Antiope, and Thessalia. These glorious struggles against foreign man-killers were recounted in oral tales, later written down in epic poems, in Homer's era, and every Greek boy and girl, man and woman, they all knew Amazon adventures by heart, and there were many versions of each tale. Amazons were immensely popular in ancient Greek art, in thousands of vase paintings, sculptures, mosaics, and other objects. The Greek and Roman authors never doubted that Amazons actually had existed in the remote past. And many ancient Greek writers in later eras, from Herodotus to Pausanias and others, they reported that women living the lives of Amazons still dwelled in lands around the Black Sea. Long before modern archaeologists began excavating the graves of real warrior women, those ancient writers from Greece and Rome understood that among the nomadic horse-riding peoples of the steppes of Western Asia, the women lived the same rugged outdoor life as the men. These warlike tribes have no cities, no fixed abodes, wrote one ancient Greek historian. They live free and unconquered. They're so savage that even the women take part in war. Amazons, remarked other writers, were as courageous and fearsome as their Scythian husbands. These are some descendants of Scythians. From very early times then, the ancient Greeks seemed to realize the Amazons of their myths were related to the living women of Scythia, that vast territory stretching from the Black Sea to Mongolia. This is an artist's recreation of a scene with a Scythian woman. The nomad women were first described in detail by a historian in about 470 BC by Herodotus, the Greek historian, and after many other ancient geographers, historians, ethnographers identified Amazons as Scythian women. Herodotus described the Scythian lifestyle and details of their burial in kurgans or mounds on the steppes, like this, and it turns out that quite a few details in his descriptions are turning out to be accurate. Archaeologists are discovering. You can see a kurgan on the left and an example of a Scythian Sarmatian burial excavated last year. Thanks to spectacular recent archaeological discoveries, we now have overwhelming proof that girls and women fitting the descriptions of Amazons in ancient Greek literature and art really did exist. They were members of tribes who ranged over the lands north and east of Greece. They were called Thracians, Sarmatians, Maeotians, Saka Scythians, Macedonae, and many other names. And many of the names have been preserved, but many more are lost. Among these peoples, women rode horses and were trained to use bows and spears. They knew how to defend themselves, they hunted, they went to war like the men. The lives of these tough, nomadic girls and women were very different from the lives of Greek women, who were usually confined indoors to weave and mind children. And that difference, that cultural difference, really made an impression on the Greeks. The Greeks first began to, they heard rumors about these people first, but they began to directly encounter these nomadic peoples in the 7th century BC, when many Greek cities began to establish trade colonies around the Black Sea, and travelers began venturing further east on what would become the Silk Routes. So they met and traded with diverse but culturally related steppe tribes and learned about their customs. Of course, each of these tribes, and there were thousands of them, had their own names, their own dialects, their own histories. But they became known to the Greeks, as I said, as Scythians. And today, for convenience, archaeologists often use that collective name, Scythia and Scythians, and just for convenience, I'm going to use that today too. So descriptions of these horse-riding nomads, much feared for their deadly arrows, believed to be poisonous, and their expanding conquests across Eurasia began to filter back to Greece. And so it's easy to understand how genuine knowledge mixed with garbled details, intriguing travelers' reports, curiosity, imagination, a lot of speculation to fill in the blanks, that led to an outpouring of exciting stories and vivid pictures about Amazons. And we know about these peoples ourselves because of archaeological excavations of more than 1,000 ancient Scythian graves across Scythia, in Ukraine, southern Russia, the Caucasus area, and Central Asia. Now, before the advent of bioarchaeology and DNA testing, it used to just be taken for granted by archaeologists that if you found a skeleton buried with weapons, it must have been a male warrior. But scientific testing is now calling those assumptions into question. For example, in the 1960s in ancient Thrace, now Bulgaria, 2 grave mounds from the 4th century BC were found and were filled with magnificent treasures. Each mound held a wealth of weapons, armor, gold and silver artifacts, and richly equipped horses, the remains of horses. And inside each of those mounds, the archaeologists found a pair of skeletons. Those remains were identified as two powerful warrior chieftains buried with their wives. Then 50 years later, in 2010, DNA tests were carried out on those four skeletons. And the results revealed that all four of the skeletons belonged to warrior women. Two fine silver cups were found in one cup in each mound, and they were inscribed with the name of a Thracian king, who's reported in ancient histories from that era, who ruled a confederation of Scythian and Thracian tribes. Those silver cups were apparently gifts from the king, perhaps to seal a treaty with those four female fighters. A more recent example is the ancient Etruscan tomb that was excavated just last year, September last year. The burial chamber contained two skeletons, one of them holding a large spear. There were also needles and myrrh in the grave. The discovery was hailed as the tomb of a powerful warrior chieftain and his wife. But DNA testing was carried out shortly after that announcement, and it revealed that the skeleton holding the spear was female. And the archaeologists had to scramble to reword their Another stunning discovery of a warrior woman, Scythian warrior woman, was reported just last month. It's in this month's issue of Archaeology magazine. It was too late to be included in my book, but maybe some of you followed the story. New scientific tests showed some surprising results about the mysterious second person buried in a golden casket in the magnificent tomb that some people identify as Alexander the Great's father, Philip II. That's controversial. It was excavated in the 1970s in Virginia, and next to the unknown person's remains were a pair of gilded bronze shin guards or greaves, you can see there, and a fabulous golden quiver cover, a number of arrows, and even parts of a bow. And what was interesting to the archaeologists is these are not Greek or Macedonian weapons. They're Scythian weapons. The archaeologists were also quite puzzled to see that the greaves were mismatched. They're different sizes. And now it turns out that the Scythian weapons and those mismatched greaves, leg armor, belonged to a woman. She was about 32 when she died in 336 BC. Her bones showed the rigors of constant horseback riding, and she had one leg that had been broken at some point in her life and healed crookedly, leaving her with a limp probably, and the mismatched greaves were custom made to fit her. Who was this real-life Amazon in the royal Macedonian household? Theories about her identity are being debated as we speak. But now that DNA analysis is becoming more common, several hundred graves of Scythian women buried with their weapons are known, and more being found every year. Bioarchaeological studies and DNA testing of adult skeletons can reveal the sex, the health, the age of death with about 90% accuracy. And the DNA studies are telling us that a substantial number, about 25 to 37% in some cemeteries, 1/4 to over 1/3 of the Scythian women were buried with weapons and died as active warrior women and were buried with their possessions. These studies are calling into question the old assumptions of the past that a body has to be female if it was buried with a mirror and jewelry, and the presence of tools or weapons should indicate a male warrior. Archaeologists are now re-examining remains that have been misidentified as male warriors, like that tomb in Bulgaria, misidentified because of their supposedly masculine grave goods. We're now learning that among Scythian peoples, it turns out that almost everyone, adults, children of both sexes, owned a mirror, knives, whetstones, fire starters, needles, awls, pigments, combs, earrings, beads, beautiful gold jewelry. And as I mentioned, about 1 out of 3 Scythian women were buried with quivers full of arrows, spears, daggers, battle axes, and war weapons just like the men. And many of those women had war injuries, just like the male warriors. Archaeology shows that Scythian women were laid to rest with the same honors as the men, with evidence of large funeral feasts, sacrificed horses, a little cauldron for burning hemp, food for the afterlife, a cup of fermented mare's milk, a chunk of horse meat on a wooden platter. It's really astonishing to realize just how many female warrior graves from antiquity have already been found. More than 300 warrior women's burials have been identified so far. The skeletons and grave goods are described in chapter 4 of my book with illustrations and maps. The biggest concentration of warrior women's burials are north and east of Greece, in Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, South Russia, the Caucasus, and Kazakhstan, the very places that were identified as prime Amazon territory by the ancient Greeks. You see that orange area there is the biggest concentration known so far. The typical grave goods of the women warriors in the heart of ancient Amazon lands include iron spears, massive armored fighting belts, leather and gold quivers filled with bronze arrows, sometimes made of bone or wood for different purposes, bronze swords, battle axes, shields, necklaces of beads and animal claws and teeth, golden earrings, and sometimes even clothing of wool, leather, fur, and hemp, and even silk, has been preserved. And the women's skeletons show evidence of a lifetime of hard riding and some battle injuries. Most of the warrior women were between 16 and 45. The youngest girl warrior ever found was about 10 when she died. She was buried in iron armor with 2 spearheads, and that's evidence that young children were trained for battle. Also in the Ukraine, next to that burial, a nearby grave held the remains of 3 young girls aged between 11 and 15. Their arsenal included heavy cavalry items, scaled armor, helmets, javelins, spear, shields, and quivers full of arrows. The girls also owned gold necklaces and bronze mirrors. The most ancient Amazon graves were found in the southern Caucasus region, in what is now the Republic of Georgia, a land strongly associated with Amazons in antiquity. The women's skeletons were buried by their companions about almost 3,000 years ago, at about 900 BC. One of the women was about 30 years old when she died. She was wearing a necklace of red and white agate beads, and she was in a sitting position with her bronze sword across her knees and a dagger and a spear at her feet. The jawbone of her horse and shield were nearby. I'll just go back to show her skull. The left side of her skull has a wound from a battle axe, and that wound had begun to heal while she was still alive, before she died. The second woman in that grave, in that burial, had an arrowhead embedded in her skull, and next to the hand of the third warrior woman were several lion or leopard claws, maybe hunting trophies or part of a leopard skin cape, like those worn by many Amazons in ancient Greek face paintings. The scientific studies of combat injuries of skeletons are yielding some striking details. Some women's legs were bowed from a lifetime of horseback. Many suffered arthritis from constant riding, and some hand bones even reveal heavy, repeated use of a bow. Typical battle wounds of women buried with weapons include ribs slashed by swords, arrowheads embedded in bones, and skulls punctured by pointed battle axes, like those shown in base paintings. Pointed battle axes are typical Amazon weapons in the base paintings, and they are found in Scythian kurgans. Remarkably, by careful analysis of bones, bioarchaeologists can often determine the direction of an opponent's attack. They can tell whether the blows occurred while someone was fighting face-to-face on equal footing on the ground, or if the wound was received while they were on horseback above the assailant, whether she was in motion when a blow was delivered, and even whether she tried to deflect the blow. And most combat injuries of both male and female warriors are on the left side, indicating that their adversaries were right-handed. All of this archaeological evidence points to a level of gender equality that was unheard of among the ancient Greeks, so it's no wonder they were both fascinated and horrified by the barbarians of the steppes. They called everyone who didn't speak Greek barbarians. Little wonder that they spun these exhilarating what-if stories, pitting strong, capable women against their greatest heroes. Here we have Achilles versus Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, and Hercules versus Hippolyta. He looks a little nervous. Unlike the restricted lives of Greek girls, as I mentioned, being an Amazon was an option for girls and women on the steppes, because they had been raised since childhood to ride horses and shoot arrows just like their brothers. This egalitarian lifestyle made perfect sense in their nomadic culture. A small group on the harsh steppes, always on the move, facing constant threat from enemies. Everyone, male and female, young and old, was a stakeholder, and everyone was expected to take part in defense and raids for plunder. It was natural and necessary to teach the boys and girls the same horse riding, hunting, and fighting skills. They all dressed similarly in practical tunics and trousers, and every member of the tribe could shoot a bow. And remember, it was among the ancestors of the Scythians that horses were first domesticated on the steppes. And this is also where the small but powerful recurved Scythian bow was perfected. Those two inventions, the horse and the bow, so riding horses and archery, those were the great equalizers in Scythian societies. That combination of horseback riding with archery meant that a woman could be just as fast and just as deadly as a man. Those two elements of their lifestyle evened out the physical differences. As the ancient Greeks reported, and archaeology is now seeming to confirm, it was girls and younger women who served as active duty warriors and raiders, while older women with children could choose to continue that martial lifestyle if they wished. And then, of course, in emergencies, everyone was capable of riding out to meet the enemy. So, whether by choice or compelled by circumstances, ordinary women of Scythia could be hunters and warriors. In other words, these foreign women could behave just like a free Greek man, glorying in physical strength and freedom, roaming at will, chasing game, and killing enemies. And this situation astounded the Greeks, evoking both awe and respect, along with anxiety and fear, and that ambivalent reaction, coupled with the storytelling imagination, generated countless mythic tales of Greek heroes encountering Amazon queens and their armies from exotic eastern lands. Those popular stories were illustrated in, as I said, thousands of artworks in Greece. Today we only have a fraction of what once existed, but we do have more than 1,000 images of Amazons in Greek vase paintings. I was struck by another very poignant indicator of the popularity of Amazons among the Greeks when I visited the Louvre in Paris, and there I saw a collection of Amazon dolls recovered from the graves of little Greek girls. The clay dolls had movable arms and legs, some of them, like an Amazon Barbie doll. Some of them had the clothes already molded on them, and they wore helmets, and they carried metal weapons, and they could be dressed in different costumes, like the one on the left. These dolls raise some interesting questions, I think, about the meaning of Amazons from the Greeks. Archaeology is shedding new light on ancient Greek narratives and the artistic representations of Amazons, and showing us how some details of ancient Greek literature and art that were once dismissed as fantasy or even overlooked altogether, they're now turning out to be accurate or near accurate representations of steppe nomads who were the historical counterparts of mythic Amazons and at least partially influenced the Greek ideas. In other words, archaeology is showing us how much the Greeks actually knew, how much they got right about real warrior women and the Scythian lifestyle. As the Greeks learned more and more about Scythians, they revised their portrayals of Amazons, adding realistic details in written accounts and art. In the 5th century BC, for example, Herodotus reported that Scythians enjoyed the intoxicating smoke from burning hemp, and archaeologists find that Scythian men and women were buried with personal hemp-smoking kits, like those described by Herodotus in the 5th century BC. And they contained burnt hemp and seeds. In Greek art, depictions of Amazons' attire and their weapons are some of the most striking changes, I think, for accuracy as they learn more and more about Scythians. The first images of Amazons appeared on vase paintings about 2,500 years ago, and those earliest scenes showed Amazons dressed like Greek warriors with Greek-style helmets, armor, and round shields, fighting on foot with swords like Greek hoplites. But Greek artists soon began showing Amazons on horseback, and we can even discern two different types of horses in the vase paintings. Some Amazons ride small, sturdy step horses, like those at the bottom, short necks, very stocky body, while others are astride tall, lean horses, similar to Akal Teki horses, bred for speed and endurance in the desert. And both types of horses have been found in Scythian burials. Other vases and sculptures depict Amazons riding barefooted with heel and ankle guards against chafing. Scythian riders guided their horses with their thighs, their knees, and their feet. And this unique vase painting shows an Amazon tying on ankle guards or perhaps primitive spurs. Greek artists started to equip the Amazons with Scythian-style weapons like those found in the Scythian burials. Instead of female Greek hoplites, the Amazons are now shown as archers, and they're outfitted with distinctive Scythian-style recurved bows and those decorated double-compartment quivers called agoritos with flaps slung on belts at the waist. Another very interesting and telling detail is that vase painters started to show Scythians and Amazons who are archers using the nomad-style thumb draw, sometimes called the Mongolian draw. And they use that instead of the Mediterranean draw used by Greek archers, the upper left. Modern mounted archers today use that thumb draw because they're also using what they call instinctive archery, where you don't have a fixed anchor. You have what they call a floating anchor, so they can be incredibly flexible, especially when they're twisting around on their horses to shoot arrows backwards in the notorious Parthian shot. The ancient Greek writers said that both male and female archers on horseback twisted around backwards to shoot as they galloped away. As I mentioned, the recurved bow used by Scythian archers was an equalizer for women. And unlike Greek bows, there was a trick to stringing the recurved bow. It can store a lot of force because of the curvature of the bow and the compression of the string. But a special technique was required to string it, not simple brute physical string. To attach the string, you have to brace the bow under your knee while seated or kneeling. Images on ancient coins and vases show Scythians, and in the upper left, Heracles stringing a Scythian-style bow, and other images and vases show Amazons stringing their bows using that special Scythian technique. It can also be done standing if one foot is braced against a rock or a helmet, as in the vase on the right. from the Smithsonian. Some artistic images of Amazon archers have been misunderstood by scholars until now. For example, this black figure vase shows an Amazon archer bending very far backwards. She seems to be aiming randomly at the sky with a Scythian and a Greek warrior on horseback on each side of her. Art specialists have interpreted this scene as an Amazon with very poor, negligent aim, or as a dying Amazon collapsing in a battle, unquote. But in fact, the Amazon's stance is an accurate portrayal of an archer shooting an arrow a very long distance, flight archery. The Greek and Scythian watching her appear to be observers of a flight archery contest, and those contests are described by ancient historians, and we even have the results recorded in ancient inscription on the Black Sea. Scythians were famous for their accuracy and long-distance shooting. There are many images of Amazons holding more than one arrow while drawing their bows. That has puzzled some art scholars who thought it might be a mistake by the Greek artist, a careless artist. But this is a realistic technique for speed shooting arrows. It allows an archer to shoot arrows in quick succession without having to reach back and get each arrow from the quiver. And archery experts point out that she has the bow in a braced position with not very much grip set back, while the string is stretched out in a drawn position. It's slightly inaccurate, but it suggests that the artist knew about the speed shooting technique, but was not drawing from life. The Scythian archers were famed for their speed shooting, probably releasing an arrow every 1 to 3 seconds. Besides bows and arrows, Amazons were often shown with swords, battle axes, and a pair of spears. Those weapons are frequently found in Scythian burials. And here they are using that whole range of weapons. This is a unique and beautiful vase painting in the mat showing an Amazon taking aim with a sling, and her 2 spears, you can see, are stuck in the ground on the left. According to slinging experts that I talked to, her stance is quite accurate, and piles of sling pebbles have been found among the weapons buried with Scythian women. And I even found a rare painting of an Amazon on horseback at the University of Mississippi, twirling a lariat like Wonder Woman's golden lasso. I don't know if there are any other images like this, but I was pretty excited to find it. She's charging toward a Greek warrior. He's cowering underneath his shield, and decorated with a snake in the upper right there. You can't really see him. This action scene with an Amazon and her lariat it decorates a woman's jewelry or cosmetic box. Several ancient Greek writers describe steppe warrior women's skills with the lasso and told how they used them to rope their enemies and finish them off with a battle axe. As I mentioned earlier, and I'm sure you've noticed in these images, the clothing worn by Amazons changed from Greek hoplite outfits and helmets to the kind of practical action wear worn by nomads whose lives centered on horses. The exuberant, wild patterns and textures of the leggings and sleeves worn by Amazons in Greek vase paintings are matched by some textiles and some garments recovered from graves in Central Asia. Typical Amazons in vase paintings are shown in patterned tunics and trousers or leggings, decorated with geometric designs and sometimes with griffins, lions, and deer, as in the picture on the right. They wear high leather boots when they're not barefooted, and soft caps, sometimes pointed, sometimes with ear flaps, and often spotted leopard skins, as I mentioned. These are all items found in the burials of Scythians. These are some reconstructions of warrior women's clothing reconstructed from grave goods. The Greeks were fascinated and appalled by Amazon trousers, Scythian trousers. That is something no Greek man or woman would ever be caught dead in. They thought that was a barbaric and outrageous way to dress. Even Alexander the Great, when he took on Persian styles, he still never wore trousers. The Greeks wore simple rectangles of cloth held in place with pins, and in contrast, trousers were stitched together from fitted pieces, usually 3 fitted pieces. Those are the first tailored garments. They take a lot of work, piecing them together, strong seams. Who invented trousers? The Greeks claimed the first pair of pants were created by barbarian women. The Greeks are actually onto something there. Trousers were indeed invented on the steppes by the men and women who first began riding horses. It's interesting, the Greeks also credited the Amazons with inventing riding horses. So they said Amazons invented riding horses and the clothing to go with it. These are some of the earliest trousers ever found on the left. Some chest armor, hats, boots from graves across Scythia. The earliest pair of trousers found preserved in Scythians' graves were from about 3,000 years ago. Trousers weren't just practical, they were absolutely necessary for life on horseback. And they serve as equalizers for Scythian women as well. The Greeks were fascinated by another barbarian custom, tattooing. The Greeks themselves considered tattoos barbaric, outrageous. Why would you ever do something like that to yourself voluntarily? Maybe even worse than trousers, because they're permanent. The Greeks thought of tattoos as punishment for criminals or slaves, but according to many ancient Greek writers, the women of Thrace and Scythia, two culturally related groups, the women of those regions voluntarily wore tattoos and considered them to be marks of beauty. One ancient Greek writer even said that the women of Thrace learned how to tattoo themselves from Scythian women. The ancient Greek vase painters lovingly detailed the tattoos of these foreign women, deer and other tattoos on the arms and legs of barbarian women. And once again, we see that sort of push-pull, attraction, anxiety for the Greeks when it comes to these barbarian women. Scholars usually identify the tattooed women in Greek vase paintings as Thracians because we have descriptions of Thracians tattooing themselves in ancient literature. The Athenians, remember, owned slaves from all around the Black Sea region, and so tattooed foreigners, especially women, were a very familiar sight in public places and in households in Athens. So they saw a lot of tattoos of people who lived around the Black Sea area. The similarity between the Amazon sleeves and leggings and the tattoo designs, I think, is really striking. And in some cases, it's kind of difficult to tell the difference. Markings on the left are tattoos, and they look very much like Amazon's markings on their sleeves and leggings. We now have solid physical evidence to prove that women of ancient Scythia did indeed have tattoos. Some of them resemble those shown in vase paintings, deer and other designs. Perhaps some of you have seen the extraordinary photographs of the so-called Ice Princess of the Altai and her exquisite tattoos of deer with towering antlers and griffins and other animals. Well, she was just one of a score of ancient Scythian mummies preserved in permafrost, whose bodies are heavily tattooed with fantastic and real animals. Some of those tattoos were invisible to the naked eye until about 2004, when archaeologists used infrared cameras at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg to reveal tattoos that had been invisible for more than 2 millennia. I have time for just one more example, I think, of overlooked detail on an ancient Greek artifact that shows how the Greeks incorporated realistic cultural facts into their depictions of Amazons. This is a beautiful golden ring made in about 425 BC. It's in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. The full significance of the scene has eluded understanding until now. The museum text, the scholar who wrote that says it shows an Amazon on a horse with her dog hunting a deer. Doesn't mention the bird. The Amazon wears a belted tunic. Her hair and cloak are blowing back to indicate the speed of her galloping horse. She has the reins choked up tight to control that large, spirited horse. She's about to spear the deer with her javelin. And the deer is so exquisitely detailed that we can determine the species. It's a spotted fallow buck with broad palmate antlers. And her hunting dog is a type of sighthound still used in Central Asia today for hunting. It's attacking from the rear. You can see that the deer's left hind leg is broken. Now what about that large bird? Why is it included in the scene? I was looking at photographs of traditional hunters on horseback in Kazakhstan and Mongolia when I suddenly realized the significance of the bird. Falconry has ancient roots on the vast steppes. It's a perfect way of hunting on the steppes. I learned that one of the female mummies in the Tarim Basin, maybe you've seen the marvelous pictures of them, beautifully clothed and exquisitely preserved by the dry sand there. One of those female mummies, who lived about the time that this ring was made, was buried with a large leather mitt on one arm, just like those used for hunting with trained raptors today. And you can see a similar mitt on this woman's hand. The favorite raptor of the steppe nomads is a magnificent golden eagle. And these young women are also traditional eagle hunters. More and more women are recovering their knowledge of that ancient tradition. So the bird hovering above the deer's head on that ring is not a random decoration. It's an eagle with a hooked beak with spread wings and tail about to attack the deer. This stunning ancient ring illustrates an Amazon eagle hunter on horseback accompanied by a sighthound. All four, the Amazon, the dog, the horse, and the eagle, all four are focused on the prize, the deer. By training these three animals, the dog, the horse, and the eagle, the nomads could make the harsh, unforgiving steppes into a land rich with accessible game. The scene on the ring, I think, is compelling evidence suggesting that the classical Greeks had heard about or observed horsewomen who had trained eagles to hunt. Amazon figures may have served many symbolic, psychological functions for the Greeks. I think that's undeniable, but archaeology now proves that warrior women were not merely figments of the Greek imagination, and the many examples of naturalistic details and ethnographic features in the ancient artworks like those I've shown you today, I think provide strong evidence that the Greek images and ideas about Amazons were certainly influenced by nomadic horse people. The Greeks interwove threads of fact and reality with imaginative storytelling to create a panoramic entire world of Amazons. Before I conclude, at the beginning of my talk, I promised that I would show some pictures of real-life modern Amazons. These are modern mounted archers. This is Katie Stearns of Oregon. Here she is again. And this is Roberta Bean of the Rogue Mounted Archers in Washington. These women actually will teach you how to do this. And if you want their contact information, I suggest you join the Facebook group Amazons Ancient and Modern to find out how you could learn to do this. Well, it seems fair to conclude that Amazons and Amazon-like women, both as a dream and as a reality, have always existed It's just that sometimes they're hidden, sometimes they come blazing into popular culture. They inspire awe in antiquity, and I think there are many signs that they appear to be riding back into reality today.